Hello everyone, I'm Sherry and you're watching Lessons Learned. So the backing I decided to get is Minky, and I've never used Minky before, but it comes in a width of close to 60 inches and I got 2 yards. And then here's my batting that I got as well, which was a 72 by 90. The quilt top itself there, each of those individual blocks ended up being 8 3/4 by 8 3/4, and the entire quilt was 54 by 64 and a half. Here I've taped my backing onto the floor, and there's the batting, and then these are the materials that I used to put all that together, using basting spray, glue spray, and pins. Now I'm preparing for the machine quilting, and I'm using a sulky rayon thread, and it's color 2130. It's a variegated pink that would go well with the bright pink backing that I got and all the colors in the quilt. So it's finally time to start doing some machine quilting, and I have decided to quilt just inside of the largest square in each block, all the way around the 4 sides, and then diagonally both ways. So I did all of those larger squares in those blocks that way throughout the whole quilt, and that's all of the machine quilting that I did before I put the binding on. So on this corner block here, you can see that the quilting is subtle, those diagonal lines. So now I'm trimming down the quilt sandwich, and the quilting has been done. I'm going to cut that excess off of the batting and the backing. I've decided to leave 1.5 inches all the way around. So here I'm doing that. I'm cutting that all the way around 1.5 inches.
All I
So instead of making binding separately and attaching it to the quilt, I want the backing to fold over to the front and create a mitered corner. So on my ruler, there's all kinds of lines on there you can use to get this effect. And there's a 45-degree line there that I'm lining up with the bottom edge of the quilt top. Not the quilt sandwich, but the quilt top. And I left about a half an inch out from the corner of that quilt top to make that cut. Each corner is going to get a 45-degree cut. Here you'll see it again. I'm lining that up and then pulling it out for a seam allowance. The seam allowance will be from side to side. You'll see me do it. Okay, so now I'm at the machine and I'm getting ready to sew these mitered corners. So I'm putting right sides together. And see, I left that ½ inch space there between that corner of the quilt top and the actual edge of where we're going to sew from. So we'll be doing this on each corner. And here in a second, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you flip that over. I'm always trimming off my tails. I don't like those left on there. So here we go. I'm turning it inside out. This is just temporary because I need to trim that seam some. But you see the effect that I'm after? Makes a really nice mitered corner. The next thing we'll have to deal with after I get these corners done is how we're going to stitch that down. So here I'm taking a test piece that I had cut off from trimming the quilt just to kind of test out some stitches that I could do for tacking down the binding. And in theory, you should be able to take Minky and do a zigzag stitch and it just kind of disappears into the Minky. But I think the more furrier ones that works with. Because when I did the zigzag here, I didn't really care for it. I thought it interfered with those little round bumps that was on the Minky, made it look irregular, and I just wasn't crazy about it. So my machine, there it is, my machine has some other decorative stitches on it. So I tried a couple of other decorative stitches as well. Here I am choosing one of those decorative stitches and doing an inch or two of it to see what it looks like. I'll show you in a second how it turned out. I wasn't happy with anything that I picked, and I didn't see anything else there that was going to change the effect that was happening with just sewing it like that with the raw edge. Here you can kind of see there's a thicker zigzag stitch. And I chose kind of a curvy I guess you'd call it like a scalloped edge stitch. I'll show you that here in a second. I didn't care for it either. And as a last ditch effort, I chose kind of a tighter, smaller zigzag design. I didn't like it either. So then I decided, what would it be like if I just turned the raw edge under a little bit and just sewed a straight seam? Now that does cause an issue when you get to those corners, but I was determined to make that work by just barely turning it under and doing that straight stitch. And that's eventually what I went with. I thought I really need to test this out on the fabric thickness as it would actually be. So I left that batting on there and then turned it under to see what a finished stitch line would look like with that turned under edge. So I have to admit something. I didn't show it in the video, but I decided to cut away the batting and just leave the binding that's attached to the backing, obviously, to roll over on top of the quilt top, and then I barely turned under that edge to make that straight stitch all the way around. And it wasn't easy. It was a little bit difficult and tedious, but this is the first time I've ever worked with this fabric. And once I got going on it, it got easier. So I think it was just the learning curve in this case. So I sewed that straight seam all the way around, and after that I was finished. Here you can see it on the back. It barely is noticeable, really. I thought it turned out okay. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to sew all the way around the quilt, and then the quilt will be done. No hand sewing of the binding. So that is something that I really liked about this method, and I will do it again in the future. here's a better view of the final result. And I really like how it turned out. First time using Minky backing, first time doing a rollover type of binding with the mitered corners. Like I said before, I would do this again. And it's almost like a weighted blanket because it has the batting in it as well. It's not super heavy, but it just feels like a really good solid quilt. And this will make a nice baby gift.